You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 275. There's no such thing as balance with Jennifer Szpigiel. If you're a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies to improve time management, elevate productivity, to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I'm looking forward to bringing this episode and conversation to you because you get to meet our guest, Jennifer from Becoming Iconic. Jen has created a multi-million-dollar global iconic brand for legendary leadership, life, and business. As the owner and founder of Becoming Iconic, Jen is infusing years of wisdom, pure, clean energy, and proven strategies for the visionaries, legends, and entrepreneurs who want to break expired paradigms and shift the narrative within the businesses, relationships, and lives. As an industry leader, top mentor, and podcast host, be ready for Jen to expand you into your full potential as the most epic, vision-centric leader for yourself and your legacy. This was such an awesome conversation with Jen, and it was so raw and it was so truthful, and man, am I so excited to bring it to you. In today's episode, we are going to cover why pursuing balance sets business ownership up to fail, what you should be pursuing instead, the shocking truth about your capacity, why we allow ourselves to live out of alignment, what feeling out of balance can reveal, the life-changing miracle Jen experienced, the important why me lesson she learned, what it means to be iconic, and actionable advice for overcoming guilt, and so much more. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. Jen, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm really looking forward to us getting to chat today. Before we jump into our topic, though, I would love for our listeners to find out a little bit more about you. And the burning question I have is, what does becoming iconic mean to you? After I did some research on your brand, I really just want to hear it from your mouth. What is it?
Yeah, great question, because it does have a big meaning and connotation to it, doesn't it? And when I first heard the word iconic, and literally it was given to me, it was not a word I used. It wasn't a word I generally articulated or expressed. And so I kept coming in when I was building away from my personal brand into a company. And so I didn't resonate with the word at first because my idea of it was Beyonce, Oprah, like the people who had reached the pinnacle of their career and made a big impact and had millions of followers. And, that to me felt iconic. So when I heard iconic for myself, I thought, who am I? I mean, I am not an Oprah. Do I desire to be the fullest version of myself? 100%. And it was my prayer for as long as I can remember, every morning waking up, just being like, please let me be better today than I was yesterday. And that pursuit of being the best version of myself turned into becoming iconic, because iconic to me means living our fullest potential, squeezing every last drop out of that sponge of life, and really seeing our capacity and fulfilling all the things we can possibly fulfill. Because iconic will mean different things to different people. You could be an iconic stay-at-home mom. Like that's what your bones, your body, your heart was meant to do. And so it's like, how can you become an even more exceptional stay-at-home mom every single day? Maybe it's an entrepreneur. Maybe it is in a relationship. Maybe it is in some sort of charity, whatever that looks like. We all can sort of realize that the commonality amongst everything is that pursuit of becoming the best, fullest version.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That was a great question of me to ask because that's amazing. I'm so glad I got to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay. So what I loved what you said and what I heard, I'll say what I heard. What I heard was also that not only is the definition of iconic different for each person, but it can evolve as we evolve as people and get to know ourselves and learn what we're capable of. So it literally is something we're always aspiring to be. And it's our own definition of, in my world, I call it your own definition of success, right? So like as soon as we can stop comparing ourselves to other people or what other businesses look like or someone in our industry and what they're doing and what success looks like, when we can get really honest with ourselves, like that's true success.
Amen.
Yeah. Okay. So that actually brings us to our topic actually seamlessly about, the pursuit of balance. And I think you think there's not such a thing as balance. So I'd love to hear from that. And what is it that you think we should be trying to pursue as business owners?
Yeah, I actually feel like the idea of balance, and I've been to conferences and watched people on stages teach about finding balance and it's possible. And I feel like for all of us in this journey of wanting to find balance, we're hurting ourselves because there's no such thing. So the very thing that's pulling us out of feeling fulfilled and feeling peaceful and feeling joyful and feeling abundant is this pursuit of balance, which doesn't exist. So if we're chasing something that doesn't exist, we're never going to feel it. We're never going to allow ourselves to feel it because it's as though it's out there somewhere and we're trying to seek it. And when we get it, then we'll feel fulfilled.
And so if it doesn't exist and you're always pursuing, then the dialogue is, I'm doing something wrong. Somebody else has got it figured out, but not me. And so it's like robbing, as you said, robbing the joy of maybe you've got it right for yourself right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this feeling of what is it ultimately that balance is going to provide for you? So what is it that you don't feel currently that you would like to invite in? And for most people, I would say generally the ones I've been talking to over the years and years of my experience, it's peace. I think that's ultimately what we're seeking. It's not balance, it's peace of mind, peace of spirit. And so how do we get that or welcome that into our lives and businesses is by being obsessively grateful for what is. I use the word obsessive gratitude all the time. So I'm not talking about list 5 things you're grateful for today. That is skimming the surface. That is, if that's all you can do in a day, great. But that's not obsessive gratitude. Obsessive gratitude is presence, paying attention, being intentional, following through on the things you say you're going to do, building of self, building of others. These are all forms of gratitude. So it's living your days that way. And if you do, and you fall on your bed at night, you're going to be falling on your bed at night with so much peace and reward because you did everything you possibly could that day to the best of your ability. That's what I think we're all looking for. It's the searching outside of ourselves often that creates the imbalance, that creates or steals or robs, to take your term, of that joy, because it's like this feeling of like, that has the answer for me. If I reach this, multi 6 figures, 7 figures in my business, then I will feel peaceful. I guess I get to be the spoiler alert, because that's what I feel we should do as leaders, is be honest and considerate and also cast some hindsight. The $1 million is not going to create peace. As a matter of fact, when you have $1 million business, there's more to hold, more to lead, more to work through. It is not simpler. So if we cannot be grateful for the $2,000, $5,000 a month coming into our business currently, I promise you and guarantee you that the $1 million won't be enough. And that's the whole journey of success, and that's the whole thing that robs us out of this peacefulness, is like this constant stretching and going for the next thing. And then realizing, okay, so Jen, are you saying to me that I shouldn't be setting goals and reaching for the next thing? Not at all. Vision is so important, but we've got to marry vision with gratitude. We've got to marry vision with, wow, today's a marker moment towards that thing I am progressing towards. And I'm going to be grateful for today because it's building the foundation to support that vision that I have of the future. And it's like a different shift or way of looking at things that can invite more peacefulness and fulfillment. I think the word fulfillment is important too, into your life currently, aside from, reaching the balance or reaching the peace or reaching the goal. It gets to be in real time.
Yeah, I think that, by personality trait of most business owners, it's on to the next thing. And then you get it. And there's not even that moment of gratitude, much less along the journey. It's like, okay, what's next? Or right before you're going to reach that goal, you're already thinking what's next and you can't enjoy that. And so what I hear you say also is something similar that I say it differently, but it's like, what do you want that experience, the journey to feel like of entrepreneurship, right? If we think of it through the view of like, it's just this destination we get to, it never is. That destination keeps getting kicked down the road over and over again.
Right.
And then when it gets kicked down the road, you're looking back and you're like, maybe some regret, some feeling out of balance. Like you've looked this way and focused all on this goal at the expense of maybe health or personal life or hobbies or self-care, really focusing on the journey. And I think that how the way you're expressing it is about passive gratitude, right?
Gratitude. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I ask you, if someone is currently truly feeling out of balance, meaning the choices they've made is not obsessive gratitude, they have put all in on their business and they feel like they haven't taken any self-care, or maybe a relationship is suffering, what's that path forward to get back into, their version of balance?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I would ask the person, is it in fact balance that's making you feel this way? Because the likelihood is the answer is no. It's probably a disconnect. So there's sort of a twofold answer to this, if I may. And there's two ways of looking at this. And I think these two perspectives could offer somebody sort of some idea of maybe where this fits for them. So the first perspective being that, what part of you have you sacrificed in order to feel like you give to this other side? So I teach a lot about eradicating sacrificial living for women, because we have been brought up, and this goes for men too, listening in, but we have been raised that you can only be really good at one thing. So as women, we've made the choice of like, I'm going to be really great at my career and build my career, but I'll have to sacrifice being a really involved, present mom, or even have a family at all. Or we've said, I want to be an exceptional mom. I want to be available to my family. So I'm going to sacrifice this yearning to grow something because, I can't do both simultaneously well. We've been taught that. Yeah. And so I not only stand behind this and want to be someone that proves that this is not fact. These are narratives, because I'm a living example. I am a mom of 4. I have a very fulfilling, loving marriage, and I have 6 streams of income. So most people would look at me and go, how? And as a matter of fact, that's the number one question I get is like, how are you doing this? Because how can you feel happy all the time, Jen? And like, how are you fitting all of this in? And so talk about balance. People are always scratching their head going, how do you have any balance? Well, first of all, what I know for sure is a woman's capacity is infinite. If only we allowed ourselves to play more with capacity and to actually see what we're capable of, we would blow our minds. But what we do is constantly scrunch in, play small, box ourselves, because that's what we've always done. It takes a radical woman to say, oh, no. I'm living an and life. I'm going to be highly successful and have an exceptional home. I am going to have great, vibrant health and be intimate with my husband. Like, I am going to travel the world and I'm going to be a steward of my money. Like, that's audacious.
Yes.
So could it be the feeling of imbalance? Could it be that somewhere you're sacrificing something or a part of yourself, and this reflection is calling you into the and life? Of realizing you don't have to chop off a part of your spirit, yourself, your vision, your goals. And by doing that, sometimes we're unaligned, which brings me into the second direction of this question, or this perspective, is sometimes we are not in alignment. We're doing things that don't fill our soul. We're doing things that we're not meant to be doing, and we're forcing. So we're forcing a business to grow. We're forcing ourselves to enjoy our career. We're forcing ourselves to stay in a relationship that's unhealthy. Why? Because we fear that maybe we'll be judged. We fear that if we admit that something doesn't align or fit anymore, that somehow we're failing. Like there's all these fears that keep us forcing something that brings no energy whatsoever, depletes our energy, and is constantly having us out of integrity, because integrity is living your truth, your personal truth. So if your personal truth is, I really always wanted to have a podcast, but you're saying to yourself, oh, but I don't have time, or that doesn't make sense because I'm doing a corporate career. What would I talk about? But your soul's like, but you're supposed to do this. And you're denying, you're not in alignment. You're not in integrity because you're forcing. Of course, you're going to be exhausted. Of course, you're going to feel overwhelmed because you're not doing the things that you're meant to do. Or maybe that chapter is complete. You've graduated. I think to myself, like I went through a divorce in the height of my career, and it was really painful and it was awful. And I look back at that and I think, if that weren't to have happened, if I hadn't followed through and realized, and we both knew it was very amicable, where, we separated and it was one of those good stories, it wasn't a bad story. But that led me down the path of where I am today even further. And so for me, it's these hard decisions sometimes in order to evolve and grow, because that is our purpose. So people say to me all the time, Jen, I want to find my purpose. I can't tell you how many clients start their relationship with me like saying that. And I love to put the mirror back upon them and say, but we all have a shared purpose. And the shared purpose is to become all of ourselves, is to come home to ourselves, is to witness our capacity, is to try different things, is to not take things so seriously. So if you're feeling out of balance, could it be that you are sacrificing a part of you? Or could it be that you are forcing something, you're out of alignment? And those two scenarios will never fuel you or drive you forward. They will feel like you are trudging through mud.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I use so much good stuff. I'm going to go backwards because I was rapidly taking notes because that was so good. So I want to go back to the sacrificing, and you called it the and life. I teach something similar and I call it the and method, that once you can figure out what your and formula is, like I want a healthy, fulfilling marriage and then fill in the blank of what you do a successful business is.
Beautiful.
What I find is so many people, like you said, don't even see that as a possibility. Therefore, their thoughts, their action or inaction is going to support their belief of it's an either or. And so the idea of just inviting our clients, I assume that's what you're doing with yours, to what is your and method or what is your and life, then becomes like the top line. Well, what comes up for you? A lot of the times it's garbage, which can be worked through mindset. Sometimes in my experience, it's strategy. It's things that can actually be changed, a decision that can be made or a business model change. It's something that can actually change that will support that being a true formula. It's like, I have this and this. So I love that. It sounds like we're very similar in that belief for sure. It's magical. And you shared a little bit about your story. And so I'll just share with mine. I've shared with my listeners before, is that I had a couple beliefs. And one of them was that I thought my marriage would change if I made more money than him, my husband, right? And so this was a belief that I didn't even really know I had until I started making pretty good money. Now, the magic of this was then I started, maybe not so magical, you and I know. So you start playing a little smaller and maybe making decisions or indecisions. But I didn't do that for long before realizing like, this is the mindset opportunity, right? The belief.
Yeah.
And in the end, spoiler alert, it came from nobody but my own brain. Like my husband is my biggest cheerleader, but I love to share that story because I truly believe that, even though there was no evidence that it was true. And because I believed it, that's how you show up. And so because for me, it goes back to the and method. That's why I was sharing that. I got myself twisted there, is that my marriage to my husband is number one. Like I love that man more than anything. We've been together for 20 plus years. Like I was nothing I was going to do in my life to jeopardize that. And yet it was all based on a story that wasn't true. Right. So I had to find my and method, right? Like how do you have a fulfilling marriage and a successful business that makes X dollars, and then work that through. And for me, it was more on the side of mindset. So I just wanted to share that. You shared with your story about, and your story went more with the other side of out of alignment, correct? Your experience.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, congratulations, because having a fulfilling, loving, intimate, connected relationship and marriage is so sacred and special. And so I applaud that, realizing the work that goes into that. And I have that now. It was a journey to get to this place with the right person. But, it's interesting. There's some days where I wake up and I think, if I only had made different decisions. And then there's days where I wake up and think, every decision I made was the right one. So it's a bit of a mind game for sure.
Yeah.
But I love how you explain the and life, and realizing that oftentimes it's the experiences, the narratives, the blueprints that have been just handed to us that we've accepted as our own without discernment. So much has to come through discernment. It's one of my favorite words, of asking yourself constantly, is this right for me? Does this feel correct for me? Is this a good decision? Playing both sides of the coin. So many people now are so distracted and so focused on the outside for validation, for support, for ideas, for all the things. Like we're just constantly looking outside of ourselves, that we've lost the most important form of discernment, which is this asking inward. Does this feel correct? And when you ask yourself in purity, in that discernment, 9.5 times out of 10, the answer is empowering. The answer is yes. The answer is full of belief and confidence. Where we lose that oftentimes is when we turn outward and look and think, oh, what will my husband say? What will this person do? What's that person doing over there? Oh, she has a more successful business. Oh, she has kids. She doesn't have kids. She's younger. She's older. We're constantly looking and giving our power away versus spending more time alone in this like sacred moments of asking what's correct. What could I do today to move the needle towards feeling joy and love and connection and growth and following through? These are like these small, little, minor, but massive transformations that you can make in your business and life to course correct constantly.
Yeah. So I think you answered the question that I was going to ask, which is, so how do you know if you're out of alignment? Like, how do you know it's a sacrifice or alignment? Maybe it's a little bit of both. And it sounds like what you're saying is you just keep going inward and doing self-reflection and asking the questions of, does this feel right? Is there anything more to that? Because it could feel really scary to do that by yourself. It could be, or you ask the question and you get it answered and then you okay, thank you. And off you go. You're like, I got the answer, but I don't know how to move forward with moving through a decision, right?
Right. And that's a great question. I think there's an important story maybe I'll share. Is I am not one of those people generally. I feel like I'm moving towards, so I should actually change my words. I'm going to correct that. Correction. Okay. I want to be careful what I say out loud. Words matter. I used to be a person who needed like a brick on the head to get the point. So why I was that way, why I heard the whispers. So it's not that I didn't hear them. Why I didn't act on whispers, why I didn't act when the voice got louder, why I needed the brick in the head was because I was that person that constantly looked outside of myself. I was the textbook people pleaser. Most of us can relate to that at some level. We all have that within us or have had an experience of that. I was living that fully, where it mattered more what you thought of me than what I thought of myself. So I didn't even really know who I really was. I was in this performative persona that would shapeshift according to who I was with to make sure that you were approving of me. And that's not easy to admit to. And it's pretty vulnerable. But because I'm on the other side of that, I can really speak to it, because when you're in it, you don't see it necessarily. And I heard whispers. I heard whispers back in 2016-ish that I was meant to do more. I had built a massive personal brand at that point. I was highly successful. If you looked at my life, you would have thought, this is the dream. And it was. I was living a beautiful life, but I knew there was more to me. I was afraid to make a move, because I thought, what if this crumbles? I'm the sole income earner for my home. If this crumbles, I can't put my family in jeopardy to seek something else. Like this is holding us. So there was lots of fear. So I dimmed it. I pushed it down. Well, it became more and more out of alignment. I remember it just feeling so incorrect, but I would push it down and force it down because I thought I should be happy. How could I want more? I'm making the income people dream of. I'm traveling the world. My husband's home full time, raising the kids with me. I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
How could I want more? Well, how it ended up manifesting is physically for me. I ended up hemorrhaging. And I hemorrhaged after really, it was a huge meeting, and I was leading it and leading a group of people. And it just, my whole body, it felt like an outer body experience. I was like, this is not correct. This is not correct. So talk about being out of alignment, but wanting to force, right?
Yeah.
I should be happy. I should love this. This is great. Anyway, I hemorrhaged and I was in the hospital. It was quite severe, actually. I was hospitalized. I was having multiple blood transfusions, and I literally believe it was an earth angel. She came into my hospital room and she said, hi. I don't even remember her name. It was like she dropped in and left. Poof. She said, this has nothing to do with medical. What's happening to you physically has nothing. There's no medical reason for this. She said, I actually think there's something inside of you that has been screaming to be seen. And your body is literally manifesting that. Is there something you've been stifling inside that is literally now rupturing out of you? Is there something? Can you think of something? And I remember she was talking and I'm thinking, I had not heard a lot of this before, like all of this manifestation. I mean, but everything she was saying was like the doors, the blinds were open. And I thought, this is it. This is what's actually happening to me. It's not physical. I have been stifling myself for so long for these fears that I don't even know would be my reality. I don't even know what this experience is going to be, but I'll never know if I don't try. And I ended up really opening my soul while I was laying in the hospital bed. And guess what happened? My body started to heal in real time. Like it was literally that fast. It was miraculous. It was my first physical experience of a miracle and magic. And that was a journey. So I say this story to answer your question because maybe this story will remind you to listen to the whispers, not to have to wait for the brick in the head moments. They will happen. But I would challenge us to be more in tune with that guidance we're given all the time, that intuition that every single one of us holds. It's just tapping in and remembering that life is about experiencing. Life is about the curves and the bends and the molding and the flowing. And when we constantly stay rigid, we miss so many beautiful opportunities.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story and your experience. And I can tell you that that's going to hit home for so many of us and so many listeners that can feel it coming on, or they know that that's I'm stuttering to find my words because I just know that it's going to help someone that's listening that knows that that's at the end of the road of denying themselves and denying what they want. And, you alluded to it earlier. I think this is you connecting the dots of like, even if you're doing what somebody else considers successful, that if it's not in alignment, it will drain everything from you, emotionally, physically, to the point that it could cause physical harm to your body.
Yeah.
And, we're going to link to another episode that we did, another interview. I had another guest that shared a very similar experience. she had shared about this like major pain in her back, and no doctor, she went to like 8 doctors and nobody could figure it out. And for her, it was very similar of just like she had been ignoring something and it manifested in her body. And when she made the connection, like suddenly something that nobody could figure out on why the pain was coming from dissipated. And so I am very much a believer of this mind-body connection.
Yes.
And to your point, if that's not the way you see the world, like it's happening, whether you kind of agree with it or not, until the moment where you're like brought to your knees and you've got to make a different decision to get a different result.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad she was able to heal. And it's not an easy thing to hear this advice, because one would say, you're telling me I'm ill or I have this ailment because I've done this to myself. I mean, that kind of personal responsibility is not an easy thing to witness or to admit to. And I'm not suggesting every ailment is a response to something you have done, quote unquote, and I'm using air quotes, wrong. I'm just suggesting that what if we paid more attention to the wholeness of ourselves and where this might be stemming from? Again, not to say that we will never be ill or sick or have aches and pains, but there's a really good book from Louise Hayes called You Can Heal Your Life. And I remember reading that years and years and years ago, and how much of that has reigned true for me. Again, it's not perfection. It's not like all of a sudden you can look in the book, you have this is why I say this affirmation, you'll be all better. It's not that simplistic, if only it were. But what it does do is constantly remind us of the areas we're out of alignment, the areas where we're not in integrity, the areas we are denying ourselves, and that stifling and that closeness. It manifests somehow. And
Absolutely.
it could be right? It could be through your business with the results. It could be in headaches, pains. I had hemorrhage, whatever it may be, but it's going to come out somehow.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it happening with chronic fatigue, low-grade anxiety. It could show up as depression. It could even just show up in your behaviors. This is my own belief, but it can just even show up of avoidance, right? Like it's action or inaction that we take in our business that gets us to where we're at. And when we're out of alignment, if we're not willing to really hit that head on and question it, I feel like we can often avoid it.
Yeah.
I also read that book many, many years ago, probably almost close to 20 years ago. And I remember bringing it to my mom. She had a heart attack pretty young, like in her early 50s. And just asking her if she would be open to the consideration that this was more than just, it wasn't just her lifestyle, that maybe there was more behind it. And she was not at that time ready to hear it. And not everybody is. And it's a lot to take ownership of a situation that you're perceiving as like not good. It's bad. But here's my belief. And I've had to take ownership in a lot of situations in my life. But to me, it's actually the most empowering thing you can do, because if you're in a situation where you're like, this just happened to me, what's the way forward? If it just happened to you, then how do you make sure it doesn't happen again? How do you get yourself out of it? But if you can even find a little inkling of taking ownership of it, it's like the stepping stone of like, how does this not happen again? Or how do I get myself out of it? And so I find it incredibly empowering. And focus on that instead of like shaming. How did I get myself here? Why did I do this? Which can come from that rumbling of saying like, where's the ownership of this in this situation?
Yeah, so good. So powerful. Reminds me again of another book. I feel like we're giving people a library here today, but there's another book called On Fire by John O'Leary. He changed my life. I met him in Hawaii, and I looked up and he was playing piano and realized he had no fingers, and realized how scarred his body was. And he did an intimate meeting for high-level entrepreneurs. And he shared his story of being burned. 100% of his body was burned. And he lost his fingers. He lost mobility. He was not meant to live. And he kept asking, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Which is such a natural response. I mean, you can hold so much compassion for that. Of any of us would say that, why me?
Yeah.
He flipped that question on its head. And this was a part of his healing journey. And he went, okay, God, why me? If this happened to me, why me? Show me why this has happened through me. What can I do? How can I impact? How can I serve? How can I change? How can I give love? Why has this come through me? So it was an opportunity versus a setback. And he profoundly changed my life because I am not immune to those days where I'm like, why is this happening to me? Or why are the kids always sick? Or why, I say that stuff too, because I'm human. But every time now, since that day, and that was years ago, I catch myself in that moment and quickly say, okay, why is this happening for me today? What's going on? Is this a moment for me to honor that I am a work at home mom and I'm going to pour myself into my kids? And this is the luxury and freedoms of entrepreneurship that I get to do this today? Or am I going to resent that I'm not doing what was on the schedule because I have a child home? Like, it really can hold you so accountable to the way you move through your day. And it was one of the most profound stories and lessons I've ever learned.
That's incredible. I'll make sure that I definitely want to go read that book. I have not read that one.
So good.
Actually, full circle again, talking about this like obsessive gratitude. So similar. So, I'm a mom too. And, 3 round trip trips to the school, sports, before, after care. Like some days you're just like, really, it's, 30, 40 minutes each way. I mean, each trip. And I always, I'm not immune to it. And then I'll stop and say, well, wow, aren't I lucky that I get to decide when I start work today? And aren't I lucky that I can, decide that I'm done when my son gets out of school and that I get to hear about his day? Because if you don't flip it and think of the things you could be grateful for, it can get you, right? It really can. And also, my son being sick, he just had one thing after. I mean, he's generally a very healthy kid, but February hit him hard. And he went to school like 6 days in February. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow. And I get to be right here at home and still run my business and work. And, how grateful that could have looked really different for a lot of people that don't have that luxury of choosing entrepreneurship and being our own boss. So,
right. And what you're saying reminds me of the ways we can sneak or get that sneaky balance idea comes back in, right? Like, we're literally talking about those moments where we're like, I just want to have time to do the thing. And this is in the way. And I wasn't planning on this today. And it's such a spiral and a loop that we can get into. But see, when you have these moments of reflection, it disrupts the loop. So you can bounce out and stop the pattern of resentment, of poor me, of overwhelm, of, feeling burnt out, whatever that emotion is for you. It's not that these emotions ever will go away. I think that's a big understood concept, is like, eventually, if you do enough personal growth and development, you will overcome these emotions. And I remember saying to my breath coach years ago during my healing, I said, that's it. You're right. I'm never going to feel guilty again. I am getting rid of guilt. I'm done. I'm done with carrying it. And she, with her very beautiful eyes, looked at me and said, you cannot get rid of guilt. It's a human emotion, a human experience. But what we can do is maneuver through those moments more effectively. What we can do is recognize them and pop out, quickly versus wallow in it. So it's kind of bringing it back to this whole idea of balance is, what are we seeking in that moment? What is it we're not giving ourselves in that moment? And then also, we're in the moment. How do we get ourselves out in a quick, expedited way versus sitting in it for the full day? And you don't think that our children don't feel that?
Right.
100% they feel it if we're thinking, because you're home, I can't do my work today. That's not, why would I project that onto my child who's not feeling well and has a fever and is home from school? That's not fair. That's not their stuff to carry. So I have got to, as a leader, as a woman, as a mom, as a wife, I have got to be responsible for the way I carry myself. And the responsibility lies in reflection always.
Yeah. My friend Jessica Rodriguez a few years ago asked me this, and she said, it's not the first thought that counts, it's the second.
Ooh, good.
Oh my gosh, it changed my world, because I already did understand the concept of like this mindset work, it's not like, oh, suddenly you don't have these negative thoughts or guilt or anything. It's about how you can get out of it. But when she so succinctly said, it's not the first thought, it's the second thought, because you get to choose the second thought.
Right.
The first one usually just, comes to you, and you get to choose if it goes through you or it kind of stays with you. And so I just found that to be incredibly helpful with my own journey of this work as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about this idea of guilt. I wanted to ask this because I think that for a lot of people, when I speak to them, that's the underlying feeling of when they say, I feel out of balance, but they're really saying, if you talk to them, I feel guilty. I feel guilty I'm not at the office when my team's working, but I also feel guilty that I'm not with my kids, or I feel guilty that I don't have dinner on the table, or like insert whatever they find valuable that they think they should be doing, that they're not. There's a lot of guilt around that. Right. Have any like words of wisdom to deal with that guilt, and how does that relate to them finding their own version of balance?
Great question. And what a relatable question for all of us, myself included. I actually just this past weekend took 3 days and 2 nights and went to a hotel all by myself. And
congratulations.
Yes. So this is one of my greatest self-care practices, because as a mom of 4, my husband's home full time, and my business, I work out of my home. It's very difficult. It feels very difficult to escape distraction or the constant pull into and have that solitude. Even I work out at home. So I'm literally in my house at all times. So for me to take myself out of this environment and give myself time and space is one of the greatest things I could do. But I was riddled in guilt. I mean, the thoughts of, what did my husband say? Is he going to be resentful that I've gone and sleeping in a hotel for 2 nights while he's home with the kids, running them around to all their different activities and having to make all the dinners, etc. I thought, what will my kids think? You're going away. You're not taking us, Mom. All these things came through me. And I thought, well, I have 2 things I need to remember. The first thing is guilt is an unnatural state. Love is always our natural state. So if we're not in love, we're in fear. And a form of fear is guilt. So I sit with myself constantly. This is another way of discerning. So I think, okay, I'm not in love because I'm feeling guilt. So that's on the side of fear. Why? Well, it was for those potentials. What if my husband resents me? What if my kids think? So I had to ask myself, well, is this in fact true? So this is the biggest question to ask yourself. Is this in fact true? And I couldn't say that it was true because I hadn't even asked my husband. I haven't even approached him to see what he would think about that. And what I did was I said, no, it's not true, because I don't know what his response will be until I ask or have the conversation. So when I went to him and said, here's what I'm feeling and here's why, I was met with, oh my goodness, you totally should do that. You deserve that. You've not done this for yourself for ages. I can see how this would be super beneficial. Go. I've got it. So what came on the other side of dropping into love, asking myself, is this in fact true of the perceived ideas? I actually deepened my marriage because I was like, I am safe. I can trust. I am supported. I am loved. I appreciated him so much and his quick reaction to support me. That's a deepening of our marriage. Like I just thought, wow, I got a good man who will never step in the way of supporting me. And then I realized, okay, am I neglecting my children? Well, no, because they actually get time with their dad alone. So that's a special memory they get to create. And it's 2 nights. Like it's not forever. It's not even a week. I mean, even a week's okay. But you know what? It's not this extreme. I don't have to make these extremes. So again, I approached the kids and said, they're like, okay, go. But it wasn't even a consideration in their minds that I was going. That could feel good, could feel bad, but nonetheless, I think it's a good thing that they don't need me. So I realized I could have made a drastically different decision. I could have fallen into that guilt, bought into the perceived notion that I'm going to upset my husband, upset my kids, and made a different decision. Or I sat with myself and thought, is this in fact true? What would be a loving way of moving forward? Well, it's presenting the idea, hearing it out. And what ended up happening was I had 3 days and 2 nights in a hotel by myself. And when I walked in the door, fulfilled, rested, creative, productive because I got so much done. I was met with a husband who hugged me like he hasn't hugged me in a very long time and kissed me the way, we kissed at the beginning because he missed me for a minute. And the same with my kids, mommy hugging, kissing, come cuddle with me, come see, come, the excitement and joy of having some space and time from each other. So everything won in that situation, but it would have been very easier for me to have stayed home, not said anything, just do the things.
Yeah.
That would have been the easy decision. But by asking myself, sitting in discernment, going into love and allowing the people around me to show their love back and to receive that, it made such a different result.
How beautiful. What a great example. And, hopefully you get that on each quarterly basis. Now you get some you time.
Yes.
So in my own journey of finding my own balance, one of the things that had helped me, have you read the book, 5 Love Languages?
Yes.
Okay. Like literally marriage changing, right?
Yes.
So for me, it was a really good book. And it was a good book because, of course, the premise of the book is you love other people the way you want to be loved, but not everybody experiences love the same way.
Right.
Go read the book if you haven't listened. Anyone listening, if you haven't read the book, go read the book. Well, I took that and I told myself, I do a lot of things wanting to show love. And as we know from the book, that's not how everyone experiences it. Right. So I flipped on its head. And so I asked my husband and my son, what makes you feel most loved? And what are your non-negotiables? Right. And so for us, it was family dinner. For my husband, I know what specific things he needs to feel loved, and it's not quantity of time. So I was able to release myself of guilt of any time I felt like I'm not spending enough time with him. Right. With my son, it's about, quality time. And so experiences over quantity. And why this was helpful was then I could be very, very intentional with those things so that there was not guilt around the people I love most not feeling loved. And it really does give you a lot of time and energy back, not trying to overdo it, right? Because my love language is acts of service. So I would acts of service everybody in my life so that they felt loved. And so I just wanted to share that as if you're feeling some sort of guilt around a relationship, if you find out what they absolutely need from you most and don't make assumptions and have those hard conversations, I bet it could be a really deepening relationship with each person because, you're just asking, how can you love them most and better? And you're breaking all of those and stories you have in your head of how you should show up.
Oh, it's so good. Love languages, you just hit the nail on the head. So important. It's so important because you're right. We start loving people the way they want to be loved versus the way we want to be loved. And that is transformative in a relationship. And the other piece for me, just to tag onto that, is oftentimes too, it shows up in resentment. So there was a time where my husband would go see his friends. He'd go out for a guy's night. And I'd be like, yeah, go, go, go. And I'd be all happy at the beginning. But then when it was time for him to exit, I laid on the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I would get, a little bit closed and resentment would start to unfold as he was going and having a good time. And here I was at home. So it was so interesting because this is the very thing I crave, right?
Yep.
So how can I, and it was through my healing and my growth that I've realized oftentimes the very thing we resent in the other person is the very thing we crave. I only resented it because I wasn't giving that to myself. It wasn't that he was doing that or doing that for himself or having a great time. I wanted him to. The reason that was kind of being triggering in my body was because I hadn't done that for myself and I couldn't remember. So that was a really eye-opening experience too. So if you're in guilt, I love that direction you gave someone of how can you love that person and really pay attention to that person. So when you make decisions, you're supported, but also maybe you're on the other side. You're like, I don't feel guilty. I feel resentful. Well, why? Is it because you're denying something for yourself? Is it that you're not doing something for yourself because, for whatever reason, and that's showing up through resentment for you? So you can look at this now from both sides of the equation.
Yes. Well, I want to just lay that over. This is so good. I feel like we could go on and on, but I do want to take this and lay this over business just a little bit.
Sure.
So the assumptions we make about how we should show up in our businesses, because we're talking about like this guilt of how we should show up in our personal lives. But in your experience with the work you do you also find that a lot of business owners feel guilt if they're taking time off work, like guilty their team's working or guilty that they're not holding up their end? Like there's a lot of stories that come up, which may be true or not true. I would love to hear, is that something that your clients or you've experienced?
Yeah. So oftentimes, again, it's just a perception, but guilt with business, there's a couple things I'd love. Maybe I'll cast a vision and then I'll teach through it. So I only work with clients twice a week, and my full work week is 3 days a week. So here's what I know people are thinking right now. Well, yeah, yours is 3 days a week because you've hit this number or whatever, the story they're telling themselves to excuse the way I've built my life. And I want to just pause and like halt and call that out, because that's not fair, because I've built my business like this. I've built my business with having specific days for specific things so that I don't hold guilt, so that everything kind of gets a point of focus. For example, Mondays are CEO days for me. Why? Because when I stopped working corporate, what was one of the greatest gifts? That I didn't have to get up to an alarm clock on a Monday morning. Like that's one of the greatest freedoms. That's what Sunday night, you're not thinking, oh boy, here we go, and sitting in traffic and rushing off to work. So I've always created Mondays to be a long morning with an extra coffee because I can, and working on my business. So there removes guilt because I'm focusing solely on my business at the very start of the week. How can becoming iconic grow? What needs to be done? What needs to be accomplished? And delegation. Delegation is the key to success. You do not need to remain a solopreneur for very long. But this martyrism and victim mentality that everybody can get in. Again, I know it's not easy to hear this, because when I heard it, it rubbed me the wrong way too. But someone's got to, open the idea to you that you can hire someone, and you do not need to make more money first, because hiring someone will actually create more space and time for you to do the things that only you can do, that creates growth in your business. So yes. Hiring before you're ready is one of the greatest antidotes to growth, right? I'm so glad you agree.
Yes.
And then having the courage and the trust to delegate, and not being a control freak and thinking like, well, I can only do it the best way. I only know how to do this. What if that person actually supersedes your expectations? You'll never know until you give them the freedoms to do so. So learn to delegate and trust, and take yourself and do the things that only you can do. It's absolutely astonishing what can be created in a business when everybody's in their zone of genius. Tuesdays, I love to podcast, and I grow my podcast. It's all I think about on Tuesdays. So I come in, I look after myself first and foremost. I work my podcast, and guess what? 3:00 on those days, I cut it off. I have an hour with my husband before kids come home. Again, it's not the quantity, it's the quality of time. And the same thing goes. Fridays, we have date days. Fridays are all about self-love, and I go on a date with my husband, and we do it during Friday because we have 4 kids. And so getting them looked after and all the activities they have, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So rather than kind of work against those situations, we created it in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, because a date does not have to happen at night at a restaurant. We go out for lunch sometimes, or we make a beautiful lunch, or we go for a walk, or we go see a matinee movie, whatever we feel like, but we have connection with one another. Again, quality, not quantity. Mm-hmm. And Saturdays and Sundays are non-negotiable family time. So you can see how when you curate a schedule for yourself and you hone in and focus on the thing you're supposed to focus in on that time, a lot of guilt starts to remove itself, because it's less of what straddling the two worlds of family and business. Like, you should not be on your phone around dinner time. And if you are, either A, it's time to hire, B, did you really focus all day and get things done? And C, entrepreneurship, there's always going to be something more to do. So that's just the reality.
You'd be out of business if suddenly your to-do list was gone. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's managing that.
Yes. Okay. I love how you said how you have created your own ideal schedule to really your schedule, and what shows up on your schedule will show you what you are prioritizing, right? And so you really created a business. And again, full circle moment, this is your and. This is your and. You're like, can I build this business, whatever success looks like for you, in 3 days a week? And then if that wasn't possible when you first thought that, I'm certain you started making decisions and hiring and delegating and skimming some of the things that weren't necessary to say, like, the goal is getting it to 3 days. And thank you for being such a great example of that.
Right. And teaching people around you to your boundaries and to hold those boundaries with you. So the other part of this equation too is I have a husband home full time. Like, he's in the other room. It's very easy for him to want to come sit and talk and what should we have for dinner? And, and the kids come home, maybe I have a call at night and they either say, oh, mommy, you're always working, which is not true. I'm just letting you know. They say that because they know the buttons, but it's not true. I'm not always working. Or, they want to interrupt. I had to teach the people around me how to respect my boundaries so that I could get the things done, so that I could be present with them. So I wasn't carrying work into the evening. So I wasn't, thinking about work while being with my husband. So a lot of it has to do with delegating to an executive team, but also the team, meaning the relationships and partnerships you have in your life, teaching them as well boundaries, how to hold boundaries. And it does take some practice. Yeah. Especially with kids, you have to remind them, but there's patience and practice that gets to build a beautiful synergy. My kids are so beautiful and thoughtful and considerate when it comes to my work. Why? Because they know I'm a woman to my word. They know that if I say, hey, I need an hour to go jump on this call, could you guys get your homework done? When this call's over, I'll be back and we can do X, Y, Z. They know that I will do that call. And when it's done, I'm not going to sit in my office and start doing more of the to-do list. I'm going to stand up, be a woman of my word, and walk back into the home and do the very thing I promised them. Those practices, that way of being, removes guilt because I'm not prioritizing one thing over another. I'm blending my worlds. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, of mompreneurship, is that you get to have these things work together versus separate or against one another.
I think that's a beautiful place to end. I mean, if that was just the whole title of today's conversation, I want to thank you so much for your time and really such a deep and connecting conversation. I know it's going to help and serve people that are listening that needed to hear this message.
Thank you.
If our listeners want to learn more about you and the work you do and your podcast, you have your own podcast, I'd love for you to share how they can find out more about you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated this conversation as well. Thank you. And, sometimes tough conversation. I think we talked about some things that are not easy always to hear, but hopefully can be received and make a shift, a change, and support somebody in their growth. If you want to hang out with me, I'd love you to come over to Becoming Iconic. So it's becomingiconic.co.co website. It hosts a magazine. So I have my own magazine for entrepreneurs. Think of it as Vogue meets Forbes. So it's going to support you in your business, but also there's all sorts of lifestyle and beautiful things of like where to travel, where to eat, fashion trends, all sorts of things. So it is like the most delicious magazine. There's a free copy on the website. So you can look at the digital copy for free. And of course, subscribe. The other place is the podcast. I think it's a great way for people to get to know us. Being podcasters, they can really decide for themselves whether they align with our values and the things we teach. So that's a really great way to get to know me if that feels like something they'd like to do. And both things are free. So that's always nice. And then on Instagram, it's Becoming Iconic. And I pour my heart and soul into that. I lost my social media last year, and tens and thousands of followers were gone, and 10 years of my memories and all of my teaching. So that was a hard pill to swallow. So as I rebuild, I pour myself over there, and it's been an extraordinary experience since starting from zero again and rebuilding that back up.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure that we have all these links in the show notes for sure. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you so much.
I have loved having you listen to Productivity Straight Talk, and I sure hope you found today's episode to be insightful and valuable. But I need to be straight with you. No change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on my conversation with Jen, I would love for you to take a moment to yourself and either journal, go for a walk, whatever it is that you need to truly ask yourself the question of, do I feel out of balance? And if I feel out of balance, why do I think I'm out of balance? Jen gave us a really great framework and questions to ask ourselves to get to the root cause of why we are feeling or could be feeling out of balance in our business and lives. If you have not already done so, be sure to subscribe to Productivity Straight Talk wherever you're listening. And if you loved today's conversation with Jen, share it with another business owner who you think would find it as valuable as I did interviewing Jen. Very insightful. In fact, my team who listened to this episode was like, oh my gosh, it was so good. So make sure you do not keep this a secret and share it with those you care about. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.